Hi guys, today is December 13, 2021, and I can't believe that in just 3 days I'll be 60 and 40 of being a prepper. Anyways, today we're gonna talk about how the governments are actively prepping and what we should do. We're just gonna talk about 6 countries, and some of them are doing their preparedness in secrecy, getting ready for the collapse of civilization. Others are taking into account their inhabitants. But let's start. Canada. Emergency government headquarters are situated at a strategic location across the country. This system of nuclear fallout shelters were built by the government of Canada in the 50s and 60s. Over 50 facilities were built along several designs for different classes of service. As of today, there are no indication of the existence of shelters for the population. However, the Canadian government has what we might call the equivalent of FEMA. The Federal Emergency Response Plan will be the equivalent of FEMA. The FERP, Federal Emergency Response Plan, outlines the process and mechanisms to facilitate an integrated Government of Canada response to an emergency and to eliminate the need for federal government's institutions to coordinate wider Government of Canada response. It also encouraged Canadians to be prepared for emergencies and natural disasters. United States of America. Even though it's known to everybody that the USA is the most prepared country, having so many bunkers and shelters and contingency plans to protect the heads of the government, little has done in order to protect the citizens. In fact, it relies on FEMA to educate the public, and FEMA's primary purpose is to coordinate the response to a disaster that has occurred in the United States and that overwhelms the resources of local and state authorities. They are ready to help when everything is gone. As we can clearly see, these two countries, Canada and the USA, are what we call reactive ones and not proactives, meaning they are concerned mainly in the continuity of the government once the event has happened, leaving pretty much their population, leaving us to fend for ourselves. Israel. Israel is a country that actively prepares for any emergency, but not just the government, but it also prepares its citizens. According to the 1951 Civil Defense Law, all homes, residential buildings, and industrial buildings are required to have bomb shelters. However, several homes or residential buildings may make use of a single shelter jointly if it's possible. In October 2010, the government, through the Homefront Command, initiated a publicity campaign to explain to the public what time people have to enter public bomb shelters after hearing the warning siren. A clear example of how Israel takes preparedness seriously is to look at the 1991 Gulf War. Israel, fearing that Iraq would attack the country with missiles carrying chemical weapons, distributed 4 million gas masks. 4 million gas masks to citizens across the country, as well as to residents of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Upon missile attacks, air raid sirens sounded nationwide, and civil defense authorities instructed the public via radio to don gas masks and close themselves in sealed rooms. Russia. A few years ago, Russia held its biggest civil defense drill since the collapse of the USSR, with what officials said were 40 million people rehearsing a response to chemical and nuclear threats. Students tried on gas masks and placed dummies on stretchers in school auditoriums. Emergency workers wearing hazmat suits were checking the ventilation in bomb shelters. An inventory was taken in Moscow of the city's underground spaces in order to allow the army to plan for sheltering 100% of the city's population. Sweden, oh, peaceable Sweden. Authorities are readying school children and adults for the kind of crisis that seemed unthinkable 10 years ago, a military invasion by Russia. Also, since 2017, the Swedish government decided to reactivate military conscriptions, referring increased threats to national security. The country is home to around 65,000 bunkers, fit to host 7 million people in the event of a war, and an official report has now advised the government to start building more following a 15-year pause. Switzerland. Interestingly, the Swiss are required by law to have a protective shelter area in their homes. Every inhabitant must have a protected place that can be reached quickly from his place of residence. Apartment blocks owners are required to construct and fit shelters in all new dwellings, and this is according to the Swiss federal law on civil protection. This is how the governments, these four countries are taking preparedness seriously and are taking into account their citizens. Must be nice to live in those countries. Apparently, those countries that suffer directly a war are the ones most prepared, are the ones that takes seriously preparedness. We have been blessed here in Canada and the United States that even though we participate in the war, it really never hit us directly. And I guess that's why we are so arrogant that we think it's never gonna hit home. You know what, guys? By now, I really hope that you are starting to get the picture of how important it is to be prepared for any unforeseen circumstances that might come to your life, either by nature or man-made. Silicon Valley techs and billionaires and governments across the globe are preparing in one way or another, and so should you, and so should I, and so should our loved ones and families. Like I said in the previous video, start small, get some food, get some water, have your transportation in good shape, have things ready if you need to bug out. Check the area you live and assess the threats in that region. Assess natural threats, assess man-made threats, even assess the most remote possibilities. I'll give you an example. You know, guys, that I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I live about 500 kilometers away from Montana and South Dakota, where the nuclear missiles silos are. I know that in the event, in the remote scenario that USA and Russia decided to go all nuclear, these locations are a clear target. So how do I protect myself or my loved ones? Well, I have an app on my phone called Windy and tells me the wind patterns and the speeds. I just need to go, check it out, and in the remote event that those silos are hit, I can see the threat in my area and take all the necessary steps to be safe. This might sound crazy to you. You might think that I'm totally crazy about it. But you gotta remember that I was prepared, I was ready in El Salvador through a civil war, and that's why I survive and I thrive. Because I remember, and I want you guys to remember, that prepping is not a hobby. It's not something you do when you have free time or remember to do it. It is a way of life. But it's a way of life that won't affect your daily life, or going on vacations, or have fun. But it's a way of life that helps you be ready at all times. Because, like I said, when the tortilla hit the fan, it's going to be really messy, and you better be prepared. Guys, take care of yourself, take care of your family and loved ones, and remember, better be prepared than sorry. See you on the next one.